All right, before we get into it, I have some news that I think is good news. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. Who's to say? But instead of doing our typical, we're doing notes on Monday, and then on Tuesday we practice everything we learned the day before, and then doing the whole process over again. Now that we have covered everything that I think we really needed extra practice on, that we needed like 2 extra days for, now we are moving everything into one day because this is the stuff that we're already pretty good at. So we don't need to waste any time. We don't have the time to waste, to be honest. So what we're going to do is just like normal, we're going to, you completed your bell ringer already, but we're going to do our notes, but then you're going to do a very small independent practice at the end of this today. And it shouldn't be any more work than you normally would have because our notes are like cut in half because we're just reviewing. So it should be pretty simple. So I'll talk about that more once we get through these notes, but just keep that fresh in your mind. This is what every day is going to look like from here on out. Our Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So here we go. Let's stop talking about it. Let's actually do it. So today we're going to review the layers of the earth and what the heck is happening inside this big floating rock that we live on. So the earth, as we know, can be divided into layers based on what's inside each layer. So these layers are called the crust, the upper and lower mantle, and then the inner and outer core. So let's start at the very center of the earth. Think of the core of an apple is the very center of an apple, and the earth is the same. The very center of the earth is the inner core, and then the core right outside of that is the outer core. Makes sense? Inner, outer. Outside of that is the mantle, and the very thin layer on the very outside is the crust. That's what we're up walking around on. You could think of the crust of a pizza being the outside layer of the pizza. I don't know why I'm talking about this so close to lunch because now I'm hungry. Ooh. But yeah, the crust is the very outside. It's the same with the earth. The crust is the outside layer. That's stuff we pretty much got down. This is where it gets a little bit complicated, is you can take those layers and put them in different sections. Let me explain. So you can take the crust and the top part of the upper mantle. So the crust, the outside, and the top part of the mantle, and we will call that the lithosphere. The lithosphere. So the lithosphere we describe it as rigid and brittle, meaning it can break up. And again, it's the upper layer of the earth. Why do we care about this? Why do we care about the lithosphere? Well, this is what we call the tectonic plates. Man, I can't type. So the tectonic plates, those are those large sections of the earth that shift and move, that the continents sit on top of. Hopefully this should be ringing a bell. We're going to talk more about the tectonic plates at a later date. Just for now, remember the lithosphere. It's super brittle. It's the top layer, and it is divided into those big puzzle piece-like sections called the tectonic plates. Now the layer below that, so the rest of the upper mantle, so the rest of this part right here is the asthenosphere. Asthenosphere. Kind of a tricky word, asthenosphere, hard to say, but this is totally different from the lithosphere. It is right below it, but it is more liquidy, so it's soft and flowy, where the lithosphere is like a hard solid. This one is ooey gooey because it's made up of completely mantle, which is all magma, right? So this is hot, flowy magma. So basically the asthenosphere is this part here in orange and red, and the tectonic plates or the lithosphere just kind of set right on top of it, and it kind of floats on top of it. Imagine like you're at the swimming pool and someone left like a tube or a floaty in the swimming pool and it just kind of like bounces on top. Picture the like floaty as the lithosphere and the rest of the water as the asthenosphere. So it's just kind of floating on top of that. So I like this picture here. I think it kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand. The lithosphere is at the top, made of that crust and part of the upper mantle, and the asthenosphere is made up of the rest of the mantle. So notice how I never said core in this. The inner and outer core, that hard, hot center of the earth, does not make up the lithosphere or the asthenosphere. Lithosphere, again, just the crust and upper mantle. Asthenosphere, all mantle. So again, why do we care about the asthenosphere? So the asthenosphere, which again is that hot, flowy middle part, this will eventually cause those tectonic plates, that hard top that we're up walking around, to move. And remember, this happens very, very slowly. Like we are constantly in motion, but we do not feel it because the plates move at such a slow speed. We don't even realize it's happening. So how does this actually happen? What's going on in the asthenosphere? Well, what's going to happen is all of this hot magma that is sitting inside of the asthenosphere. What's going to happen is the further down you go toward the center of the earth, the closer you are to that core, the hotter it is, because that core is kind of like an oven. It heats up everything around it. So what's going to happen is the hot magma that's getting heated up by this core, it is eventually going to rise toward the top or the outer layer of the earth. It's going to rise up more towards that lithosphere because heat always rises. Imagine you're in like a really old house or in like the attic or even in this school building. I've noticed I'm up on the second floor and it is so much hotter up here than it is on the first floor. Maybe you remember that when you were in the building. Or if you're in that really old house, it's always so much hotter in the upstairs than it is in the basement. It's actually usually pretty cold in the basement. That is because heat is always going to rise. So the same thing is happening in that asthenosphere. That hot magma is going to rise up towards the lithosphere. So while that is happening, at the same time, the magma that is up toward the top, the cool magma, is going to rotate back down toward that inner core because it's getting cold up here. It needs to be heated up. So it's going to move back down toward that inner core. So as this magma is in constant motion, it's creating kind of a cycle just like this. So as that magma moves, that lithosphere that's sitting on top of it is going to move along with it. It's going to kind of pull it, kind of like a conveyor belt in the factory or something. So that cycling of the magma, the hot magma rising, the cool magma sinking, that's what we call those convection currents. Those are currents of magma that are going to slowly over time move that lithosphere. Now, very last piece. Those tectonic plates in that lithosphere, as they move and shift in shape over long periods of time, they are going to eventually form different landforms on the earth. Forms of land. Makes sense. So all the landforms, again, they are found in the lithosphere because that's the top layer. That's where we're up walking around. So there are different types of landforms. Pretty much we've heard of, I'm sure, almost all of these. Some of these might be new to us, but we can put them in different categories. It's pretty easy. Actually, let's start over on the right because I think this one's much easier. Landforms that are completely made of water. We can call those aquatic landforms. So these are landforms that are completely made of water. If you think of the word aquarium, we know what an aquarium is. That's where you go to see a bunch of fish in like big fish tanks somewhere. Sure. So you think of aquarium, it also sounds like aquatic. They have that same first couple of letters. So they're both dealing with things in the water, right? So these are your lakes, rivers, oceans, streams, creeks, oceans, seas, bays, and gulfs. So a bay is kind of like a gulf. And we know the Gulf of Mexico. If you think about, if you look really closely, there's Mississippi. You think about Gulfport and Biloxi are down by that body of water. So that big body of water is the Gulf. And a bay is just like a gulf, but it's much tinier. Not as gigantic as this one is. So those are all of your aquatic landforms. Or you can have terrestrial, kind of a fancier word. Terrestrial landforms are just landforms that are on dry land. So your mountains, your cliffs, your valleys, your canyons. Think of like the Grand Canyon is like a big hole in the ground. Mountain arches, which is just like this, kind of like an entryway, but it's made of rock naturally, kind of cool. Or a sand dune is just like a big pile of sand. So they're either made of hard rock or soil or dirt, like a valley pictured here, or sand, also not rock. Okay, so last but not least, there are some underwater rock features or underwater terrestrial features, so kind of a mixture of both. We have those deep ocean trenches. Think of Finding Nemo. Remember when they were supposed to swim through the trench, but instead they swam above the trench and then they ran into all the jellyfishes. So it's like a big hole in the ground. That is a underwater trench. Or that mid-ocean ridge is basically like an underwater mountain. And we have talked about that a little bit. We're going to talk about it more later on. So those are all the types of landforms that can form in the lithosphere. Here is your cheat sheet, just to help you remember different ways the lithosphere can be described, different ways the asthenosphere can be described. If they ever ask you if the Earth has always looked the same, the answer is no. It is constantly changing because that lithosphere is being moved by that asthenosphere, causing different landforms to be made and shifted and changed and created and all that fun stuff. One thing I'm going to add, it's not on my screen, but it's going to be on your screen because I haven't added it yet. But I think a good way to remember which layer is at the top, so the lithosphere is at the top and the asthenosphere at the bottom, you can remember lithosphere starts with LIT and it's pretty lit up here. Oh, I know that's bad, but that's the only thing I can think of to help you remember the order. So if you think it's lit up here at the top of the Earth and not so much at the bottom, helps you remember that the lithosphere is at the top. Okay, so that is all the review for today. Now remember, we are also doing our independent practice today as well. It's really not long, it's really not hard. We're gonna do some more boom cards because I like them. Y'all did really well with them. So click on the link, open it up, and go through your flashcards. The one thing I do want to say with these now, these I'm not gonna grade on just completion, I'm gonna grade on correctness. So the thing with that is you can go through these cards multiple times. You can go through them as many times as you want. So if you do not answer a card correctly, you can loop back and do it again. So if you did it once and you missed like 3 of them and you're not satisfied with that grade, you can do it again and you can do it until you get 100%. So that's what I'm going to be looking for because we are at the point where we got to have this stuff mastered. We got to have it down, and it should be pretty easy if you look at your cheat sheet and your notes as you do it. So really, you might not have to do it more than once, definitely not more than twice. So you're set. If you have any questions about any of this, hit me up. If not, I'll see you tomorrow where we hit up something else to review.